Belém Mission is a gigantic mission, for starters. And the portion of Brazil that it lies in is up in northern Brazil. So you have a bunch of states along the north of Brazil. And the most northern states would include some of them, the more famous ones, Amazonas, which that's the Manaus Mission now. And then there's the state of Pará, that's Belém Mission. Then there's another state called Amapá. And Amapá is actually part of the Belém Mission as well. I'll talk about that a little bit after. But the Belém Mission is actually a really old mission. It's been around for a long time, but it used to be gigantic. The Manaus Mission that we know today was once part of the Belém Mission. So basically, the entire top half of Brazil was almost all one mission, and that was the Belém Mission. But ever since, they've been carving it up and forming dozens of missions, and so the Belém Mission's a little bit smaller, but it's still really big, because the state of Pará is huge. And specifically, some cool things about it is that a lot of the Amazon forest runs through there, that the Amazon River cuts right through the state, and so the city of Belém actually sits right on the mouth of the Amazon River as it dumps into the Atlantic Ocean. So Belém itself is cool in where it's situated, but don't get me wrong, it's not just ocean. Outside of Belém, there's actually dozens and dozens and dozens of islands. And apparently, one of the biggest islands in the world is outside of Belém. It's called Marajó, which there are buffalo on this island. So that's really weird. I always wanted to go there, but they haven't opened up an area there yet. But one of the cool things about the church in Belém is that now there's about 9 stakes in one district, something like that. But the phase that the church is in right now in Belém is that it's just growing like crazy. The church is catching like wildfire. There's so much work to be done right now in the Belém Mission. And all over the place. There are areas being opened up all over the state. Just because that's how big it is. About 6 of these stakes that I just mentioned were just in Belém, just in the capital city. And a few of these other stakes lie along different cities that are far away from Belém, from where mission headquarters are. There are 3 distant zones, as we call them in our mission. There's one in Santarém, which you have to take a plane for about 2 hours to get to that area. Another zone is Marabá, which is a city that takes about an hour and a half by plane to get to. It's like commercial airline, right? Not a little doty plane, but. And then the other distant zone is actually in the state of Amapá. As I mentioned, that's the Macapá zone. And that's a really special one. But yeah, there are all these different distant zones, and I spent about half my mission in these distant zones, and so it's really interesting that you're far away from mission headquarters, so there will be long periods of time where you don't get to see your mission president. But it's cool because you get trusted a lot to go out to these different distant areas. So I actually enjoyed my time out in the distant zones the most. But now the church is moving into a phase where they're trying to consolidate in between these bigger cities and Belém. So you want the church to kind of spread out and take hold everywhere. And so right as I was leaving the mission, they were opening up a lot of areas in different cities, within the state. And so you'll get to go on a lot of good adventures in Belém. I would say that's one of the primary things of that mission, that there's a lot of adventures to be had there. And the cool thing, one zone, you can only get there by taking a boat along the Amazon. So that's pretty cool. And all the missionaries like to talk about how they actually went along the Amazon to get to one of their areas. In total, I served from June 2013 to May 2015, but in Brazil itself, I served January 2014 to May 2015. My areas within Brazil, my first area was called Canaã dos Carajás, in the Zona Marabá. My second area was the area Cidade Nova in Ananindeua, in the Zona Cidade Nova. And then my third area was a city called Santana in the state of Amapá, na Zona Macapá. And then my last area was a borough called Tenone, which is a part of the city of Iquaraci within Belém, na Zona Iquaraci.
So at the time there was an east and west, the state. So Brazil was divided up into states, kind of like the United States. They're the United States of Brazil. and Belo Horizonte is the capital. Minas Gerais, General Mines, I believe is what that means, is the name of the state that I was serving, and the capital is Belo Horizonte. And it was divided into two missions, east and west. And at the time, there was only one temple, if I'm not mistaken. There might have been one in the way north. But I know there was the one temple in São Paulo, Brazil, and people would bus for a week at a time to get down there. And that was it. It was outside of our mission district, so we were never able to attend at the time. But in Minas Gerais, now Brazil itself is a very Catholic country. But Minas Gerais, the way I understood it at the time, and probably even today, is that it was almost like the capital of Catholicism in Brazil. It was just the most staunch, the most traditional Catholic state out of all of them. And the capital of Brazil actually was in Minas Gerais at one point before it had moved to where it currently is. And in that city, they're just cathedrals, as often as you see in Utah, a chapel, and they were everywhere. And it's gorgeous, gorgeous little city, but very, very Catholic. So at the time, we were teaching from the discussion booklets. We had 6 distinct discussion booklets. They were memorized, and typically you would almost breeze through the first half of the first discussion because everybody had some belief, some foundation in God, and believed in them to some degree. So we, usually we just jump straight to the first vision and Joseph Smith's bit. It did make it a little bit difficult. I believe ours was one of the lowest baptizing missions because of that tradition. And their idea was if they could increase the work and increase the number of converts in Minas Gerais, it could have an influence and kind of trickle out to the rest of the nation. And so there was a lot of emphasis on the work in Minas Gerais to kind of get that work rolling. But for the 2 years that I was there, we were, I believe, one of the lowest baptizing missions. Still a few hundred per month, a couple hundred, I think, because I think a few hundred was the pretty average for Brazil. But we were down in like the 200 range, just maybe under 200. And so that was kind of the feel for that. It did make the work a little bit difficult. It made it easy to talk to these people about religion and about God. It was very easy. The people there were super friendly and always ready, willing, and eager to talk about life and about the meaning of life and things like that. But it did make it difficult to transition to changing those religions because it did come out of a really staunch kind of traditional Catholicism. We had one young couple, beautiful young couple. We loved teaching them. I would say my testimony grew a fair amount in teaching them. The Spirit was just really, really strong as we taught this couple. Probably one of the strongest experiences as we taught them. And we went through all 6 discussions, and then we got to the end, and we said, "So will you be baptized?" And we had already asked them several times, "Will you be baptized?" They said, "No, we've already been baptized." And we were kind of confused, so we went back and we went through and we reviewed all the major points throughout all the discussions. Do you believe Joseph Smith? Do you believe the prophets on the earth? Do you believe the priesthood was the authority? Blah, 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 so on and so forth. And they agreed and said yes to all of it. And we said, "So will you be baptized?" And their response was, "No, we've already been baptized into the Catholic Church." So there was something that was missed there. But, and so we're like, well, okay, I guess that's it. So we moved on, but it was that kind of a mentality, very staunch. It's tradition. That's what we've done. I wouldn't want to leave my family's religion for anything. So that did make it a little bit difficult. Climate-wise, obviously it was pretty humid, but it wasn't super humid. It wasn't so humid. During the rainy season, it was. So we had a pretty mild climate. It wasn't like the rainforesty, jungly place like you'd think in the Amazon, like you would imagine in Brazil. There was even one city that we lived in where they had all left for Carnival, and where we were was really close to the beach. The beach was outside our mission, but it was really close, so they all bussed out to the beach. And it was just classic. We were walking down the street, nobody was in the street, just me and my companion, and just tumbleweed blowing across the street. I mean, you couldn't, it was the most abandoned town. It was just classic. And then to have the tumbleweed just kind of reinforce that. It was really funny to watch. But in the capital, in Belo Horizonte, there were wards. You did have several wards. You had stakes, obviously. As we got out into the further cities, I served mainly in branches. You'd usually have one, maybe two branches in the cities that I served in. There was one small town that was quite busy, quite active, and had 4 branches and actually had a chapel built. In most cases, I think outside in most of the cities that I served in, if not all of them, except for that one, we were meeting in room spaces above stores, or in just little roadside, shacks, things like that. So nothing major, small little branches. Attendance could vary a lot. In fact, the extreme north city was one where they had the 4 branches, wonderful members of the church up there. But in the extreme south, they had an experience with missionaries, and it had completely depleted. There were probably about 20 people who attended on a regular basis in that city. So it varied a lot. When you went, like I said, when you were in close to Belo Horizonte, you would have the chapels and you'd have regular attendance, and you'd have 100 to 150 up to 200 people attending. But for the most part, I was in branches with low attendance, and a lot of work to do, a lot of reactivity as well, a lot of reactivity. At the time, like I said, we were doing memorized discussions. When I heard about Preach My Gospel coming out, I loved the idea of it. Having a memorized routine, I felt, for my personality, kind of restricted me a little bit more in relaxing and really engaging in conversation with these people and getting to know them. In my life now, as I'm thinking about when I interact with people who think differently, which is nearly everybody, right? My own children, members of my own ward, I feel like one of the things that I feel is important is to really just take the time to listen to them and hear them. Hear where they're coming from, hear what their experiences are. Don't be so hung up on the idea of getting in there, teaching the discussion. I realize that's the missionaries' kind of main focus, but really getting to know them and hearing what they have to say, because it can help customize the discussions. And and like I say, with the memorized portion of it, I feel like that made it difficult for me, because I had this bit that I had to get taken care of to be able to make sure that they were ready to be interviewed for baptism, and not really making sure that they were understanding the principles of the gospel, especially as it related to them and their life's experience and the things that they had gone through. So that for me is probably what I would do differently, is I would take more time to listen, and not just to them, but to what the Spirit is would be telling me about their experience and what piece of the gospel they needed to be hearing at that time. That was probably what I would do a little bit differently. I served from 1995, January is when I arrived, because at the time we went to the Provo MTC. Shortly after that, they opened up an MTC in Sao Paulo, and they just started shipping the missionaries straight to Brazil. So I was 2 months in the Provo MTC before I went down. So in January of 95 to December of 96 is when I served. And I started in a suburb of Belo Horizonte called São Benedito. And that was the one that we had, Santa Luzia was the name of the city. And that was the one that we had opened up. After that, I served in the city which was farthest north, the hottest, and the one that had the actual building and 4 branches in Nanuque. And then after that, I moved back down to a city called Governador Valadares, which was an interesting city because I think they said the ratio of women to men was 7-1, because so many men left the city to America to work and earn money and save money and eventually hopefully bring their families. So there were a lot of men that left. There were a lot of women in that city. But then it was interesting because I was called back to Nanuque for another several months. So I served in that city twice, which I didn't complain about. I loved serving in that city. It was a wonderful town. And then after that, I moved back down to a suburb just right outside Belo Horizonte, which was called, I don't remember the name of that town. But that was an interesting one. That was a fun city to serve in. And then from there, I went down to a city called Barbacena, which was where they had the the difficult work, where the missionaries had kind of disturbed things a little bit previous to that. So served in that one, and that was my last area. And then I left Brazil from there, from that area.
The Belo Horizonte mission is probably about 10 hours across by bus. It's condensed since I was there. It's split off into a couple different missions. When I was there, it was probably 14 hours from top to bottom. And it covers most of the state of Minas Gerais, which is a pretty large state that nobody's ever actually heard of until they go to Brazil. And it's right above São Paulo. So you're about 9 hours north of São Paulo. Everybody in your mission will attend the temple in São Paulo or in Campinas, both of which are 9 hours apart. But people in Minas Gerais they're in the Campinas temple district. So I was not able to go to the temple on my mission because it's outside the mission boundaries, and anybody going to Belo Horizonte probably will not as well. So just get used to 2 years without going to the temple. That wasn't really a detriment to you, to missionaries, simply because the Lord blesses missionaries, and I'm sure that the Lord will compensate missionaries for their lack of ability to attend the temple during that time. Let's see, Minas Gerais is known for its pão de queijo, which interpreted means cheese bread. It's where cheese bread came from. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Tucanos, but they have some pretty good cheese bread there. So about 20 years ago, there were a couple missionaries that in the southeast of Minas Gerais, in a small, very Catholic town, that decided that one day they just got so fed up with people that were rejecting them, and they kicked a statue in the town, and it broke. They broke a statue, and the town went nuts. Literally, the missionaries had to be pulled out, and every member of the church in that city had to either leave the church or move out of the city. And so I would strongly advise against doing stupid things as missionary, because you are representing the church, and you're representing all other missionaries, and your actions might have long-lasting consequences. All those members in that city could no longer go to church. Either they had to move, pick up and relocate if they wanted to stay members of the church, or they just had to abandon the church. And so that was it's a very serious problem, and because the church could not stay there anymore because of the rioting. So please, missionaries, don't be stupid. Remember who you are and that you're representing the Lord and other missionaries.
So I served in the Brazil Campinas Mission. It's in the state of São Paulo. Part of our mission was also in a state called Minas Gerais. Our mission had split right like a month before I'd gotten there into, the Campinas Mission, and the mission is called Piracicaba. And then, this is embarrassing, I have no idea the geographic. I don't know. Everyone's like, oh, how big was your mission? I'm like, well, like big enough, like 6 hours, like north to south. I don't know. But Campinas is beautiful. It's a pretty bustly city. Definitely not a tourist city. Like my parents were like, oh, like maybe we should pick you up, or like maybe we should come, go see it with you. And I was like, well, like, I mean, I don't even think there's a museum there. Like there's not much like touristy attractions there. But it was the second temple. It has the second temple that was built in Brazil, and it's about 2 hours from São Paulo, so they're super close. Yeah, like I told you before, kind of a cool experience was my younger brother was called to serve in Brazil, and when he was in the São Paulo MTC, he went to the Campinas temple because they like the missionaries to go through the temple while they're there, and they just don't have enough space in São Paulo. And so my little brother sent me a picture of himself in front of the Campinas temple, and it was so cool because I was standing where he was standing 6 months before he was there. So it was really special. It was really, really special. In Brazil, most everyone has seen missionaries or talked to missionaries. So people know who we are, they usually know what we're doing, and they're usually pretty willing to talk to us. I mean, definitely, like, there's people who don't want to talk to us. It happens pretty often. But yeah, on my mission, when I got there was about 100 missionaries. And then by the time I left, there was like 200 missionaries. So like kind of a part of my mission was like, I'd get in an area and then like we'd come home one day and there was like another set of bunk beds in the house. And we're like, no, like, I mean, you know, like more missionaries is great, but you're like, oh, like, we're so tight. It's going to be even tighter. But it was really always super, super fun. I was in one area for 9 months and we lived in 6 with 1 bathroom. And that was fun. Yeah, it was crazy. And you're all on the same schedule. You all have to get ready, you know, in an hour. And so you're just like, everyone gets 6-minute showers. Brazilians are very friendly. They love people. They love making friends. They're very interested in being hospitable and giving you food, whether you're hungry or not, which is great, and water. And they're very, very kind. I love them. I miss them. I guess, like, yeah, like, usually, I mean, look, it was probably easier on my mission to, like, get into doors and talk to people. But that doesn't mean that everyone we talked to really wanted us to come back, or they were really interested in coming to church or preparing to be baptized or making changes in their lives. And so that actually sometimes was really challenging because, you know, you'd go into someone's house, you'd fall in love with them after 10 minutes. You'd think these people are great and, you know, they need the gospel in their lives. And then you'd kind of realize after a little while, well, I actually think like they're not really they're interested in my friendship and they're not interested in our message. And that's kind of hard because you form this relationship and it's hard sometimes to walk away. But I mean, you have to, because we're there to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and help people who want to make covenants with him. And sometimes people don't want to, so that's okay because they're not ready yet. That's the other thing too is I really believe that Heavenly Father is preparing all of his children to receive the gospel, whether in this life or the next. And I really think part of that is having conversations with missionaries and, you know, I don't know, just not being ready, I guess. Actually, I had this one very cool experience in one of my areas. We always try to make it a goal to talk to the people who we were sitting next to on the bus. So on my mission, we travel around by bus. And so we always try to make it a goal to talk to the people that we were sitting next to or standing next to or whatever. And so this one day I sat down on this bus and this lady turned to me before I even had a chance to say hello. And she said, "Hey, are you a missionary from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?" I mean, like, that never happens. It never happens that someone knows, like, you know, what the full name of the church is. And I said, "Yeah, actually I am. My name's Sister Gwen, you know, what's your name?" And she told me that she had been meeting with the missionaries probably about a year before. And she had gone to church and she had been reading the Book of Mormon. But at that time, she wasn't ready to give up drinking yet. And so she'd stopped taking their lessons. And she said, "But you know what? I feel like I'm ready now. I really do want to be baptized." And I thought, this is great. I'm so glad that we got on this bus. And she ended up being in the area of the other sisters in our ward, and they taught her, and she was baptized about 3 weeks later. So it was really incredible. It was one of those moments where you realize that Heavenly Father is able to bring those who are ready to receive you right next to you. It's incredible and very faith promoting. So I served in 4 areas, and they were mostly like, you know, smallish apartments with like a kitchen with a table in it, and then like a small living room, which just had like our desks for studying, and then like bedrooms and a bathroom, which is all you need because you're hardly ever home. So I lived in 2 companionships, except for when I was in Jundiaí for 9 months, we lived in 3 companionships. So there were 6 sisters, 1 bathroom. Yikes. It was pretty packed. So when I was in that area for 9 months with 6 sisters and 1 bathroom, it was great. I would wake up at like 6:28, so like 2 minutes before everybody else, so I could get in the shower first. And everyone gets so mad. They're like, "Sister Gwen, like, you always get to the shower first." I'm like, "Well, if anyone wants to get up at 6:26, you can meet me there, but yeah, I'm gonna get up at 6:28 and get the shower. And then I was transferred to my last area where we were only living in 4 sisters, so there's just 2 companionships, and there were 3 showers in that apartment. And I thought, this is a celestial kingdom. I mean, I can take 2 or 3 showers a day if I want to. This is great. So that was kind of funny. So our mission hymn says, "We're missionaries of the Brazil Campinas Mission. We are the Lord's army. We work for His glory. We share His love with others. We are the army of the Lord. We work for His glory. We share His love with others. Together, all together, we're going to build His kingdom here on the earth. Nothing is going to hold us back. Pressing forward, all together, without fear or doubt. In the mission in Brazil, Campinas, we give everything to the Lord."
Aw, that's so cute.
Yeah, it's a good, I would say, I sang it a lot. Like when I was just walking around every day.
Sounds pretty catchy to me.
It's very catchy.
It's awesome.
Yeah. It's been a hymn in our mission for at least like 20 years.
Oh, you guys are lucky.
So who knows who wrote that thing? I don't know.
Find out, though.
It's good.
Yeah.
They did a good job.
The Curitiba Mission, it was before I got there. It had been created, I think, 3 or 4 years before I got there. My president was would have been in his 2nd year, so it would have been created 4 years before I got there. Before that, it was just parts of other missions. And before my president before he changed over from the last president, it included a place called Acre, where they had to fly, like the missionaries had to fly there for transfers. They could only have one piece of luggage. They drive really light, and you just fly for transfers instead of bus or car or anything. And it was a place where it was kind of legend, where everybody they baptized dozens every weekend, and like some missionaries, they'd break like 200 baptisms because of that area. So it was just a legendary part of the mission. But then by the time I got there, it was cut, and so they kind of took more of the southern part of Brazil. So we had Mato Grosso Sul, and a little bit of Rondônia. There's 3 states that kind of border Paraguay and Bolivia. And so ours was kind of farming community, kind of ranchers. And then in Rondônia, there's part of the Amazon jungle, and I served in part of that too. So it's kind of a broad range. Cuiabá was the hottest, and it was kind of in the middle of the mission. And then you go all the way down to where it's cold, and there's a bunch of cattle down in Mato Grosso Sul, and then up all the way to the Amazon jungle. And because we served close to Bolivia and Paraguay, we were able to cross the border sometimes in some cities. They kind of were our border towns. And so we'd run into people that spoke Spanish, but we didn't even notice sometimes. We'd be speaking Portuguese, they'd be speaking Spanish, and we'd kind of be talking to each other just like they were Portuguese. We could understand them enough, and they could understand us enough that we could talk. And we taught various people from Bolivia, and so that was pretty fun being on the border like that. And it's a really big mission. I traveled from top to bottom one time, and I think it was a 36-hour bus ride. So it's just kind of it was by myself. I was just on my own, just traveling from the top to the bottom. That was kind of an experience, just how big it was. And it's kind of cool because Cuiabá is in the center. It's the very center of the landmass of South America. It's the furthest away from any ocean you can get is Cuiabá, which is kind of cool. They have a monument dedicated to that.
So I know it's the south half of Paraná. So Paraná is a state in Brazil, and it's literally split into 2 halves. The lower half is below the river, and the upper half is above the river. I'm pretty sure that Curitiba is where the church started off. So we've got some members that are like 40 years old there. Because usually Brazil has like members that are only 1 or 2 years old, but they've got like a firm grounding there in Curitiba, so it's pretty old and it's got some good firm roots, which is nice. It's probably the best mission in the world. And what else can I say? It's one of the colder missions of Brazil. Usually when you think of Brazil, it's like super hot, but in the winter it actually can get down to 50s, and sometimes it's that cold where it gets inside your bones. And so if you're a sister, you will want to bring tights for sure. So don't disregard that. And then it rains a fair amount too. It's near the southern part of Brazil, so I think that's why it's colder than the northern part. It's farther away from the equator. It's rainy. It's a good amount of rain, but also, it's probably the most Americanized city out of all of Brazil. Curitiba is the most up to date. It's got a really good bus system, and it's got a beautiful city, and the city's clean. So it's pretty up to date. So you won't see a lot of forestry. I keep thinking of Brazilian words, sorry. You won't see a lot of that out there unless you go into the interior, like Guarapuava, Prudentópolis, or you can see a little bit of the beach if you go to Matinhas. We have a temple there in Curitiba. It's in the Curitiba North mission, so depending on the rules, if they decide if you can or can't, because sometimes you only can if it's in your mission. But I got to go about 4 times because I was serving in the city. So there's one right in Curitiba. In the city, it's wards. It's good, strong wards too, and active wards that help you with missionary work. And then in the interior, or the outskirts, I guess I'll say, it's more branches and presidents. And there was one that only had 12 people, and Prudentópolis had about 40 to 50, I think, maybe. And then, so they get really small in the interior, the outskirts, but really strong in the city. So for girls, I think it was about 1/3 Americans and 2/3 Brazilian. Maybe. That might have been with the rush of the callings, but for me, I only had one American companion. All the rest of mine were Brazilian, so that was cool. But I knew of girls who had a good amount of American. It all depends on what you're supposed to get and what experiences you have to pass through.
Florianpolis is an island just off the coast of Santa Catarina, which is a state in the south of Brazil. It is known for some of the most remarkable beaches in the world. Literally, there will be people from all over the world that visit the beaches there. This can mean a lot of different things for missionaries. A lot of different cultures, a lot of different experiences, and in that kind of an environment. As far as the state goes, the Mission of Florianpolis covers all of the state of Santa Catarina, including 1 city in Rio Grande do Sul and 3 cities in Paraná. It's a pretty big mission, and a lot of the mission is in the exterior parts of the state is pretty rural. A lot of farms, a lot of people that grow crops for their living. You'll see that there. Pretty interesting facts about Santa Catarina. The banana capital of the world is there. The second biggest, or the biggest Oktoberfest outside of Germany is in Santa Catarina as well. Other interesting facts. The church began in Santa Catarina in Brazil. So the first branch was set up in a little place called, I can't remember the name. It's in the center of the state. And the first baptism took place in Joinville. So there are some pretty interesting consequences as a result of that. The the church is very old there, but it's also a little bit hard because there's a lot of German influence and a lot of Lutheran and Catholic religious values that make it hard for people to open their minds to new religious ideas. Other interesting things about Santa Catarina, there's a lot of Italian influence in the the west side of the state. So you'll see that in different places in the state, there are a lot of different cultures. You can be in one transfer, have one type of people with one type of religion predominant, and then be transferred and have a completely different experience, all in the same mission. To give you an idea, I met someone that didn't come across another Portuguese speaker until he was 26. So in certain parts of the state, all they speak is German. And their ancestors are German, and they are very Catholic. And then in another part of the state, you will find a lot more of the African influence, a lot more of international influence, like Florianpolis, for example. So that's something that I really enjoyed as a missionary on my mission, because I could see there was so much to learn and so much rich culture all in one place. Alright, so other interesting things about my mission is that the climate is very diverse. There are areas that literally exceed 100 degrees, and the humidity is saturating. It's literally like a jungle there, and it's very dense, very rich in the earth. You see all types of different plants, flowers, and trees, and it's quite amazing to behold. Other parts of the states are quite different. There's also the highest point in Brazil, very nearby. And actually the very highest point in Brazil is in our mission. And it actually snows there. One of the few places in Brazil. So the people will pride themselves in that if you ever serve in that region. People would often mention about the snow that they got to experience in 1980. And that was a very cherished memory, and to them it was very cold. And it actually does get pretty cold. It doesn't get to where it snows, but because of the humidity it feels much colder than in many places that I've been in the United States. So on one end of the spectrum you have freezing cold in the mountains, and then on the other end you have paradise at the beach and scorching weather. Florianpolis, as I said earlier, is known for some of the best beaches in Brazil and in the world. On the island of Florianpolis, there are 41 beaches alone. So as you can imagine, there's a huge rush of people there during the summer. Other interesting things about the area: international surf competitions happen there. Draws a lot of attention. There's the I have to be careful not to speak in Portuguese, but there's the pine tree festivals that happen in the mountains. There are, as I said earlier, the bananas. Let's see what else. Yeah, just lots of different cultures. A lot of Afro-American, you'll see Italian, Portuguese as well.
After 6 weeks, I was actually called to go to the mission office to serve as the executive secretary of the mission. So that's when I kind of learned all about this kind of the church in the area, the church in the state of Ceará, which it's Fortaleza is the city, Ceará is the state. When I entered the MTC, the mission had just split. It was one of a new mission that was created. I think 52 missions were created in 2013, and they created the Fortaleza East mission. So when I got to the MTC is when they did that split. And so when I got there, it had been split a few months before. And so Fortaleza takes most of the city of Fortaleza Mission takes most of the city of Fortaleza, and then a few what we call interior cities, which are outside of the capital city, which is Fortaleza is the capital of Ceará. And so it takes a few cities, and actually while I was there is where they opened up the interior cities. We have a city about 2-3 hours away from the capital city called Itapipoca, where there's a small branch. And I was able to go there. And then also we have, there's a city called Pecém y Paracuru, both on the coast. Pecém is a big port for the state of Ceará, and those both have small branches. All of those were open, while I was there on the mission. And then while I was in the mission office, we opened up a city called Canidé, and my companion, who was training me to be the executive secretary, was actually called, and he opened up that city. It's about 3 hours away. Very Catholic city. It has a big famous Catholic statue, San Francisco, and that has a small branch as well. It's a special opportunity to get called to go outside of the capital city. Most all the missionaries are inside the capital city. We have 8 stakes in our mission, and there's 8 in the other mission. So within the state of Ceará, there's 16 stakes. So the church is growing really fast. Back in 2009, President Monson announced the Temple of Fortaleza, and in 2011, Elder Bednar visited, and he broke the ground. And they have the land, and everything is still planned for that, but it hasn't been constructed yet. And we're now in 2015. But while I was there, the church was growing really fast, still is growing really fast. We had Elder Anderson visit us in 2014, and in this year, 2015, Elder Christopherson came to visit us. So it's a really fast growing area of the church. I think in the late 1980s is when kind of the first stake was created there, and since then there's been additional 15 stakes. So it grows really fast. Lots of members, faithful members, and it's just it was awesome to be a part of kind of the church as a first and second generation there. Most of the people that are members of the church, they weren't born in the church. Sometimes they are. It's, I think, rare that you get a third generation. I only knew a few families that were third generation of the church, but most of them, were baptized in the church not at 8 years old, and they remember. I remember the missionaries when they first came, or when they first talked to my dad on the street, or something like that. And so that kind of thrives, and kind of within the church is just such a missionary-minded organization there, because each of them have personal experiences. And so that's something I loved, going there, and they love the missionaries because we were the people, and they look at us and they see that name tag, and well, that's what brought this joy to our family. And a lot of them were baptized, within the last year, and they're super part of the church, and the church is very including. And I love bringing people to church, and when it's not too hard to get people to church there. The buildings are very beautiful, and people always know where the church buildings is, and because it's usually the nicest building in the part of the town, and so it's not hard to get people there. And when people get there, they're kind of wrapped up in this awesome culture of love and unity, and they feel the love of the Savior. And there's lots of churches there. Beyond the LDS church, but everyone that comes, they say there's just something different here. And so I think for that, being the church being so missionary minded, the church members and kind of they know what it's like to go to the church for the first time. When many people, I didn't know, most people around here, they don't know. Our grandparents have been members of the church, our parents. We don't know what it's like to kind of show up there at a time, and we kind of take it for granted. But the people there, since they were baptized at, well into their lives, they understand the people that we're bringing to church, they understand where they're coming from, and they're able to help them out. So for that, the church is growing at a tremendous rate there, and will continue to grow. My first area in the Brazil Fortaleza Mission was Sevilla, Ala Sevilla, which is ward. Ala means ward, Sevilla, and it was in the Ceará stake. And then I got transferred to Aldeota, which is the big part of the city where you have the big skyscrapers, where the mission office is there, and that's in the Fortaleza stake. And I actually spent 7 months there. I was there for quite a while. I love Aldeota. And I have lots of good friends in Aldeota. Really love that part of the city. And then I got transferred to Alaberehio, which is part of the Litoral stake. And that's kind of on the outskirts of the city. My area actually bordered the next city over, which is Caucaia. But I really love that area. And really great people in that ward and that stake. Really awesome missionary-minded people in that stake. And then I was transferred to an area called Parque das Nações, which covered a few bios or a few neighborhoods of Fortaleza. Really love that stake as well. It's a Montesi stake. I really loved all my areas, but that one I have a lot of good friends that I still talk to on almost a daily basis through Facebook. I love it. And then my last and final area was Caucaia, which is the city just right outside of Fortaleza, and that is where I ended my mission, and that covers almost all of Caucaia, and then within our zone there was lots of cities in the interior, so we had to travel every week on a bus to go out to Itapipoca, which is about 2.5 hours away, or we were going to Pecém or Paracuru, which are both coastal cities, and a lot of traveling in that last area as well. But awesome, all 5 areas, really great. So Sevilla I spent only 6 weeks, then Aldeota was 7 months, and then about 4 months in Berejio, 4 months in Parque das Nações, and 4 months in Caucaia, about that. So, but I loved all my areas. I was extremely blessed to go through the wards I did, and I just love the members and the people that I was able to come in contact with and help them become members of that ward. And each ward has a special part in my heart. I got to Fortaleza, and then I was there, I don't remember the months now. I used to know the exact months, but I remember I got there and I stayed inside the city limits of Fortaleza my entire mission until my last transfer, where I went to Caucaia. But it's really just a river, Caucaia is not technically part of the city of Fortaleza, but it's just a city right on the border of it. It's part of the, I don't know what they refer to it here, but it's, I guess, a suburban city. I don't know, suburb. I guess it would be a suburb of Fortaleza. I don't know. But so yeah, but Caucaia is right there in Fortaleza, and so I spent almost my entire mission in Fortaleza, and then just the last little bit, a city right outside of Fortaleza. But I was able to travel quite a bit and kind of see, kind of way out there, which a lot of missionaries don't get to see. Most missionaries that the mission had at the time when I was there was 230, and there'd probably be 200 of them in the city of Fortaleza. It's very rare, and it's a special opportunity to be able to go out and kind of see the state of Ceará a little bit more than just the city of Fortaleza. And it was awesome. I loved it.
So the Fortaleza Mission, while my trainer was in the mission had already split once. It had split from Fortaleza to be the Fortaleza and the Teresina, is what it's called. So that had split under the previous mission president. Then, while I was there, and a month before I left, the mission split again. So it became Fortaleza and Fortaleza Leste, or East. Fortaleza East. It was going to be split into 3, but then they changed a section of it was going to go to a different mission, but they fixed it at the end. So in that whole area, there's a lot of missionaries, and there are a lot of members. There's around, I believe there's 15 stakes, and a lot of members of the church. There's a lot of work to be done with the members. There are many less actives who have not been contacted in a long time. We're talking thousands and thousands of members. And while that is unfortunate, that many people have become inactive in the church, seeking after and rescuing people who haven't been active in a very long time is a wonderful opportunity for missionaries. At very least, even if you aren't able to find that one person or they're not interested, almost always they live next to somebody who is interested, or a family member of theirs wants to be baptized that wasn't old enough when they were there, or wasn't interested when they were baptized. And so the opportunity going after less actives and trying to find them and bring them back, the harvest is plentiful, and truly the field is white in that regard. In many ways, when you pray about who you should visit, they'll often give you a list of members, and you'll go through and it'll be less active members or whatever members. Many times, if we will pray over those names and those addresses and schedule them in, either the Lord will take us to the people He wants us to go, or when we tell Him where we're going, He will put the people that need to meet us in our path while we're on the way. So maybe, and this happened more than once, we're on our way to some place, whether it's a less active that we wanted to find out who they were and meet them, or whoever it might be. We're going in that direction, and then we meet someone, and all of a sudden we're like, this is why we're supposed to be here. So that opportunity is great in Fortaleza. One of the other blessings of Fortaleza is everyone after about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, not everyone, but most people sit out in front of their houses. And all houses are surrounded by walls and a large, I guess they have their gate to get into their house, and that's always surrounded because it's not secure, it's not safe. But so they're out, and it's good that they're in front of their house because that means they're on the street. And so when you walk around, there's always somebody to talk to, and always someone who's willing to listen. A lot of people are willing to listen, and they listen to everybody that comes, and they might not be really interested, but the people in Fortaleza are so loving, outgoing, accepting. Even if they're like, I don't want to listen to your message, but do you want a glass of water, or do you want some juice, or do you want a pop or a soda or something? And so they're great. So the people there are always willing to be so loving and helpful, even if they don't know you or don't want to listen to your message. And sometimes that is a way that you can start talking to people who normally wouldn't want to listen. So I served in Juazeiro do Norte, and then I was there for 2 transfers. Then I was transferred to Parque das Nações, and I was there for 2 transfers. Then I was transferred to Beira-Mar. I was there for 2 transfers. Then I went to Sítio São João, and that's Zona Messejana, Estaca Messejana, at least it used to be. And I was only there for 1 transfer. And then the next place I was transferred to was Maranguape. Love Maranguape. I was there for 4 transfers. I loved it so much. And then after I was in Maranguape, I was transferred to José Walter II. Spent 2 transfers there. No, 3 transfers actually. And got to know the people in that stake. And then after that, I was transferred to Araturi in Caucaia, and I was there for the last 2 transfers of my mission. So I got 7 different areas, a lot of places, but got to see a lot of people.
So Brazil Fortaleza Mission, it's up in the northeast part of Brazil, and so it's in a place called the Sertão, which is more of the dry, deserty part. It's was one of the first parts of Brazil found or settled by Europeans, I believe. It's a little bit more humble, poor financially than other parts of Brazil, especially southern Brazil. It has really, really good beaches. I never saw the beach in my mission, but from what I hear, people go from all over the world to go to the Fortaleza's beaches. But as a missionary, obviously you will not participate in that. And the church is strong in Fortaleza. It's been in Fortaleza, the city itself, about 30 years. There's around 21 different stakes around the Fortaleza. There's now 2 missions in Fortaleza. And so in the Fortaleza proper mission, there's about half the city and then several interior cities. And then same with the Fortaleza East mission, part of the city, and several interior cities. And the church is strong there, depending on where you serve. There's several branches and groups. There's also several mini wards. Most of the wards I served in probably had about a attendance every week of 80 to 100 people. Would be probably about normal. There are some wards that have more people that attend. In the past, it was the highest baptizing mission in the church. I don't believe it is that way now, but about 10 years ago or so it was. They're building a temple there, and that should be done, I think, in 2 years. I think 2016, 2017, one of those. It should be done around then. Right now, the closest temple is in Recife, which is about a 12-hour bus ride from Fortaleza. So the great thing about people in Fortaleza is they're really open. The members are really, really helpful. Baptism is super important to many of the members. And then the nice thing with the Fortaleza Mission is the church has expanded a lot in the city itself, but there's a lot of interior cities where the church isn't even there. For instance, on my mission, and it's just been recently that the church has started to expand there. On my mission, I was able to actually open the church in an interior city. And so there's been a few others interior cities where the church has been opened since I opened that city. And so now there's a lot of places where the church is brand new in those areas. And I believe they'll probably open even more in the near future. And whereas a lot of other parts of Brazil, a lot of the church has been open in most of the cities around.
So the Londrina Mission is pretty much due west of São Paulo, and it's in the upper half of the state of Paraná, and then it has a little bit of the state of São Paulo, and it stems out from in between the border of Argentina and Paraguay. And the history of the church in Brazil, there's actually an Ensign article all about it. So it started off, I think the first member was a German woman, or maybe it was a German couple, and then they found each other, and then they were years and years without any actual church organization, but they stayed faithful. And then I think the first mission was actually German, if I remember correctly, in the south. And then, so it started for years and years, it was just a few members of the church, but then when it picked up, then it just soared as far as church population in Brazil goes. In my areas, I served in 2 wards and 2 branches. And I feel that's pretty normal that you're going to serve in a few wards and a few branches. There's quite a few branches. Okay, so we have about 190 missionaries, if I remember correctly. There's no temple in Londrina in the mission. So for part of my mission, the closest temple was south in Curitiba. And then for part of it, it was in Campinas when I was in São Paulo.
So geographically, our mission was located in the state of São Paulo, and there's a little bit that was located in the state above, which was Minas Gerais. And so, but the majority was in São Paulo. And so we went from Araçatuba, Três Lagoas, down to Araraquara. And from the mission headquarters to Três Lagoas, it took about 10 hours on the bus. And then from the mission headquarters to Araraquara, it was 2 hours. It was pretty close. When I was in MTC, I told some of the professors where I was going, they'd say, wow, you're going to a hot area. Because even though it was in the same state, it was pretty well known in Brazil for being just very tropically hot. And I think on average, I would say it was 88 degrees year round. And then some days it got up to, I remember once it got up to like 49 or 50 degrees Celsius, which I think is like close to 120 or around there. So that was a challenge, you know. A lot of missionaries would be like, oh, let's just go get an ice cream because it's like 30 cents, you know. But you know, forcing yourself to be out on the street when no one was out on the street, not even a dog, is like, that was a good challenge. So my first area was in Catanduva, and they told me I was going to a ward, and I got there, and so I still was like thinking the U.S. And the ward had an attendance when I got there, it was like 35, 36 people. But to boost and get the benefits of having a stake, you know, many of the wards, which were branches, kept that namesake just so that, you know, the stake could continue to receive help. And so, and that was not uncommon either. I served in another ward, my fourth area, which was Franca Vicente da Parasi. It was about 60 some people, 70 some, and that was a ward as well. I think there's about 9 stakes in the mission, and I served in 3 of them. I served in 4 areas in Brazil. The first stake was São José do Rio Preto. The second stake was Ribeirão Preto Oeste. The third stake was Franca. But in Ribeirão Preto Oeste, I had 2 areas. And so I got to see the actual city and how it was like in the metropolitan. And then like the small city I served in was a city of like 88,000. And so everyone, you know, it's always like that. Church history there, formerly, Ribeirão Preto, the center of our mission, I was told that they used to have about 6 stakes, I think. And then when I was there, we were down to, I think, 3 or 2. And so it's demographically, there's a lot of just, they say it's like the rural, like the interior of Sao Paulo. And so like there's a lot of rednecks, caipiras is what they say. And like the world's largest rodeo grounds are located within that mission, Barretos. Got to visit there. There's quite a variety of people, you know. It wasn't difficult to see people of all skin colors, and you know, nationalities too. We taught a couple of Japanese people. We taught people from, you know, several of the Latino countries. It was pretty normal. So I finally got there in April 2014, and I left in May 2015.
My mission president one time, he gave a training on why São Paulo South was the best mission in the world. He literally, he took a lot of time and made a list about why this was the best mission. I just remember some of these facts. São Paulo South is, I think it is still the 2nd smallest mission in the world. It's like Temple Square and then São Paulo South. And that's really great because there are a ton of people in a really small area, which means you can work effectively and efficiently, where you can go out every day and find new people to teach. And there's always new people to teach because there's millions of people there. You get to know your areas really well. You can be effective with your time. You don't have to spend a lot of time traveling. So it's really a great, it's, I mean, the field is white already to harvest there. There's a ton of people and you can always find new people. The church is very strong in São Paulo. It's the center of the church in Brazil. And in São Paulo South, there are 11 stakes. So 11 stakes in about what takes to drive your car about 2 hours. There are 11 stakes, which means there's a lot of member support. And if you try, you can get a member to go out and teach with you every day, which is crucial in someone's spiritual development, to have a member friend to go through that conversion process with you. São Paulo South was a recently divided mission. It was divided in 2013, and that boundary gave us, it gave the coast to a different mission, so we're focused on the city and a little interior region. It's called the ABC region. So our mission is just one happy cluster of church members. It's a really small area. São Paulo South has a lot of church history. A lot of church leaders, Elder Godoy, Elder Adjukaitis, Elder Costa, a lot of the early apostles and prophets passed through there because it was like the Brazil South missions. It was like half of the country. But Sao Paulo has always kind of been the epicenter of church growth in Brazil. And so Sao Paulo South, which is in the city, has a lot of that history in its area. So a lot of the earliest chapels in Brazil and our mission, a lot of the church offices are just a little bit outside of our mission. It's a great area for the church. On the mission, we always talked about how Joseph Smith's story is really applicable because of the same situation, where there are a ton of religions and there's just confusion. Everywhere you go in Brazil, you can see a church. Brazil has a lot of bars. People just open their garage and make a bar. And the running joke is that Brazil has more churches than it has bars because everyone can make a church out of their garage, and that's what they do. And so literally on a street you can have anywhere from 5 to 7 churches just lining the street. And then you go a step above that and you have the bigger churches. You have Congregation of Christ, you have Jehovah's Witnesses, you have the Baptist Church, you have Protestant churches, and you have the Pentecostal churches. And these are kind of the bigger churches, Universal Church and the Church of Grace. Then you have, of course, the LDS Church. A lot of common misconceptions, well, all of every misconception that they can have about the church they do, because I think the adversary has been really strategic about getting some bad rumors out. But the missionaries always debunk these rumors just with good behavior. You know, when you treat people well in the street, the first thing they always say is, wow, I'm impressed. I didn't know your church was so great. I'd like to learn more about it. So the best thing you can do with that is just be a good person. Brazilians really respond well to that. A lot of times they'll mistake us for Jehovah's Witnesses. There's one religion, there are a few religions that people should take care to avoid. Which kind of gets into some voodoo and black magic and stuff. And a lot of times people will mistake us for those religions. And so you have to be really careful to say that, no, we are Christians and we believe in Jesus Christ, and we don't do that, to help get the church its correct and proper name among the people. With Brazilians, they are so open and inviting. Literally almost anyone will invite you into their home and listen to you as long as you want. That's dangerous because you can confuse hospitality for interests really easily. And so as representatives of Christ, your first impression cannot be, we're cool people. Your first impression has to be, we were sent here from God to help you with your salvation, your well-being, your exaltation. And so when you do that and you commit them right away to an action, you say, you know, it is a pleasure to meet you. We're representatives of God. You have to be happy. You have to be smiling. You have to transmit some of your joy to those people. And then you have to say, we are here to baptize you. And then you have to say, we have this commitment for you to do. Will you do it? We will come back tomorrow. A lot of Brazilians can do every day. A lot of them, in Sao Paulo, everyone has to work a ton. Like, you'll meet people that leave at 5 in the morning and get back at 1 in the morning. And it's impossible to teach them during the day. And so you have to make some kind of exception for those people. But for the most part, you can usually find a half an hour every day where you can go back and follow up with those commitments. And if you don't commit them really early on, what can happen is you can get led on and have these progressing investigators for weeks that never progress. And so the most important thing you can do to help someone progress is really monitor their progress. Are you reading? What are you learning? What did you understand from the reading? How do you feel about this? Did you pray about it? What was your answer? Did you not get an answer? Let's talk a little bit more about your answer. Just you really have to facilitate their process. And then if you do that, they will progress and they will get baptized. But you have to be a little bold, because Brazilians are really polite and they'll be like, yeah, we'll do that. No, don't worry. No, you can leave it to us. We will do it. And you have to be like, I am telling you this is what you need to do. Will you do it? What can I do to help you? I'm committing you to do this. And when you do that, people will take it seriously and they'll progress. You can't get into this habit where you're like, oh, they'll do it next time. You have to be a little bold with them. Yeah, so in our mission, it varies quite a bit because we have 11 stakes. The church is really strong. But most of the strength in the church comes from good families, like everywhere. And so in an area, my second area, I was sent by my mission president. I was new, and my companion was even newer than I was. And we got there, and before we could even start proselyting, the stake president wanted a meeting with us and the bishop. He brings us into his office and he says, "Elders, I asked the mission president for 2 miracles because this ward needs your help." And he explained to us that if we didn't baptize 10 men, that ward would close. Because there were, I think at that time, there were 6 members of the church, priesthood holders, and a relief society of about 30, 35. And it was a ward of over 600 people. And so that was a hard ward. The missionaries blessed and passed the sacrament every week. We were in ward council and executive committee. It was us and the bishop, and that was it. A lot of the other priesthood holders just were too busy. They couldn't go, or they didn't go, or they were against the church, or they were inactive. But that was, I think, one of my most inspiring areas, is just to see the dedicated members and their perseverance and their faith. A lot of miracles happened in that area. I went to another area where the attendance was weekly, close to 200 people. And that was a great area to serve in as well. Because you see the faith of the people, and you see their decidedness in keeping their covenants every single week. And so in São Paulo South, you can get this kind of eclectic feel where you'll go to an area where the church is really strong, and you go to an area where the church is not as strong. And they're really close together, which is funny. Overall, the church is really strong. You can get a lot of resources in São Paulo that you can't get in other places in Brazil. I started in Saúde, which is kind of in the richer part of the inner city. Because really, in Brazil, it's reversed. Usually in the city are the richer people, and in the exterior are the poor people. So I went in Saúde, and then I went to Vila Clara, which is in the zone Piratininga. And then I went to Americanópolis. And then I went to Rio Grande da Serra. And then I went to Alvarenga, in a place called Parque Dorotea. And then I went to Zaira, in a place called Mauá, which has some hills that you would not believe. It is so hilly. That is the area that everyone talks about in the mission, where your tie can scrape the ground as you're walking up some of these hills. So that was a fun place to end my mission.
As far as missionary work goes, I know that when I was down there, they reached the milestone of over 1 million members in Brazil, which is a really cool milestone. And it really is, it's a place where the church is just so ready to grow. The people are humble. They're already faithful people. Most of them have been Catholics their whole life, as the German influence brought Catholicism and that type of thing. And so everybody really has a strong testimony or a strong belief in Jesus Christ. Even to the point of truck drivers will put signs that say, God is faithful, or I believe in God, and stuff like that on there. I mean, they may be a tough customer or a tough looking person, but they have this faith in God that's just kind of built into them. And so it really makes for missionary work that is unlike any other place, I think, in the world. They're ready to receive it, and they have this desire to learn the truth. That's what my experiences was, as we taught people, as we helped them understand about a true and everlasting gospel, that they were excited about that. They had believed in this church that came from Europe that they didn't really know a lot about, or their parents had believed in it, and they were ready to accept something that was living, that was receiving modern revelation, that type of thing. And as far as that goes, the growth rates were incredible. I mean, as we saw in our mission, my mission went from about, I think, around 45 baptisms a month, which is very low for Brazil, up to 150 baptisms a month, which is a substantial growth, just because the people were ready to receive it. The missionaries were teaching lessons by the Spirit, and it grew a lot. I know there are lots of parts of Brazil that grow a lot faster and have a lot more baptisms, and they're the areas that usually aren't as strong Catholic. We had a lot of strong Catholic people in Minas Gerais that were really set in their ways of Catholicism because of tradition and not necessarily because of belief. and so it was hard to pull them away out of that tradition and demonstrate that there was a true church. So yeah.
The church started going to Brazil. I forget exactly the years, but Elder Faust served his mission in southern Brazil, and he was one of the pioneers, I guess, the first missionaries there to get the work done. I forget how many missions there are, about maybe 28, probably more than that now. There are, how many temples? There's São Paulo, Campinas, there's Rio Grande do Sul, I think, has one. Manaus has one now, Recife, probably 6 to 8 temples, give or take. My mission just got a temple last year. That was really cool. So the church has been there for a while, at least maybe 30, 40 years, give or take, my best estimates. Very strong. The people are really accepting of the church. I think just because of all the civil wars that they've had, just with all the coups that the people had with the different governments, and predominantly Catholic country. And so there's that Christian background, so people really identify, and they want to get those answers to the soul. Why am I here? Where I'm going? And I think that's a big thing, and generally anywhere you go where people want to know their purpose. And so I think serving as a missionary, being able to help bring that to people and living what you believe, I think makes a big difference and resonates for the people there. But it's definitely always growing. There's always baptisms in Brazil. I remember when I was there, they were baptizing a lot of people, just in general, in all missions. So the work I think it's getting there. It's still progressing. A lot of retention has to be done, I think. But it's a really good work down there.
The Curitiba Mission is, obviously the best mission in the world. It's in the state of Paraná, which is south of São Paulo. You can get there in an hour by plane from São Paulo. Curitiba, the city itself, is divided into 2 missions, Curitiba and Curitiba South. The Curitiba Mission takes up about 1/3 of the state of Paraná, I think. Paraná is a pretty big state. I think there's 3 or 4 missions in it. Curitiba, Curitiba South, and Londrina. I don't know if there's 2 missions in Londrina. But one famous thing in Paraná is are the Iguaçu Falls. But that's not in our mission. That's in the Londrina mission. I was bummed to find that out, but whatever happens. It's pretty significant in Brazilian church history because the first branch or ward that was established in Brazil was in Paraná, and that was part of the Curitiba Mission. I don't remember which city it was in. It might have been Ponta Grossa, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on it. But the city Ponta Grossa, it's part of our mission. There's 2 stakes in it, and it's the city with the highest member per population in Brazil. There's, I think, 300,000, maybe 500,000 people in the city, and there's just a ton of members. One of the areas, Bom Sucesso, where I served, is known as one of the most baptizing cities in Brazil, or areas in Brazil. That city's just a city of miracles. I love it. And Curitiba has a temple. It's actually in our mission, so that was nice. We didn't get to go often, but it's really great because you can take your converts, less actives, and if they're going to get sealed, it's right there in the city, so you can go when they get sealed. I'd say most people are Catholic. They say they're Catholic, but they don't really practice it. They just say it to get out of going to church with you. But there are a lot of evangelical churches. They're becoming really popular in Brazil. There's a saying that on every block there's a evangelical church and a bar. and it's so true. There was one street we worked on, and there were 3 Assembly of God churches on the same street within like 2 blocks, and we were like, why? You don't why don't y'all just go to the same one? But like anybody can start their own church, so you'll see a lot of tiny churches. If you work in the center of the city, you'll see some big ones, but mostly they'll just be like little churches that look like they're having meetings in a garage. That's a really common thing in Brazil. I didn't hear a whole lot of this in Curitiba, but when I was in Ponta Grossa, a lot of people mistook us for the Masons. I think partly because a lot of the affluent church members are Masons in Ponta Grossa and Curitiba. So that was interesting. I'd never met a Mason before in my life, and then I met some members who are Masons, and they told me a little bit about it, so that was cool. You're always going to have word of wisdom issues with the people. We were discouraged from working with people who weren't married, because that's something that's really common in Brazil. People just get together and start a family and live together for the rest of their lives, but they never get married. We were discouraged from working with those people because they usually, the reason they don't get married is because they're super poor, and it costs a fair amount of money to get somebody married in Brazil, and it takes a long time, and it's just a big hassle. So if your ward is really supportive, what we would do is we would take those people, if they really wanted to go to church, we would take them to church, get them integrated with the members, and if they wanted to get married, they would work it out with the ward to get help if they needed to get married. But we as missionaries tried to stay out of that because we could be there for just one transfer and then we would be gone. So those people we left up to the ward, and when they got married and were ready for baptism, we would step in and do the interview and things like that. But we mostly focused on people that were already married. With the word of wisdom, I really liked the system we had. Our mission president, this might change once the mission president changes, but our mission president told us that we didn't have to have a certain amount of days that an investigator had to quit a substance to be able to be baptized. He encouraged us to, exercise our faith and promise our investigators that once they were baptized, their addictions would quit, and it worked. It would depend on the case as well. Obviously with illegal drugs, we couldn't baptize them if they were using it, because that's a really big deal. But with things like coffee, we would promise them that if they would be baptized, and they would be able to stop, and they did. So we were able to see a lot of miracles working that way. I didn't meet a lot of people who had an issue with tithing. Even the poorest understood that they needed to pay tithing. I think that's something that's part of, Catholic culture and part of the evangelical culture that the Brazilians are used to, so it's not an issue for them. There were some people that had issues, but you can always explain it, and if they're sincere, they'll understand. My first area was Tarumã, which is in the Tarumã stake. It's in Curitiba. Then I served in Pilarzinho in the São Lourenço stake. It's also in Curitiba. Then I went to Rio Verde, which is in the Boa Vista stake. It's in the city of Colombo, but it's pretty much a part of Curitiba. It's right next to it. And then I went to Guaraituba in the Boa Vista stake as well, and that's also in Colombo. And then for my last 2 transfers, I went to Ponta Grossa in the Bom Sucesso area.